If I had to start my non-tox journey all over again, these are the first swaps that I'd make. Not the trendiest, not the most expensive, just realistic swaps that actually make the biggest difference in our homes. The good news is you don't need to throw everything away overnight or completely redo your kitchen, because that's definitely not what I did. Hi, I'm Amanda, the Non-Tox Mama. And here I focus on realistic, budget-friendly ways to create a healthier home with less overwhelm and more intention. One of the first places I started making swaps in our home was the kitchen. Because when you think about it, the kitchen is where we interact with food, water, heat, and storage all day long. And over time, I started learning more about things like plastics, scratch nonstick coatings, and how heat can increase what leaches into our food. But I also want to say this clearly, I did not change everything overnight, and I don't think you should either. I replaced things slowly over time as they wore out or when I found better options within my budget. If I could recommend just one kitchen swap to start with, honestly, it would probably be water filtration. I personally use the Aqua True because it filters out a huge range of contaminants, things like chlorine, heavy metals, pesticides, and microplastics. I also try to store our water in glass containers. These are all glass. This is one of the biggest changes for me because water is something we use every single day. And honestly, once you start drinking filtered water regularly, you really notice the difference. The next big swap that I made was moving away from older, scratched, non-stick cookware and switching to stainless steel. I know stainless steel can feel intimidating at first because everyone says food sticks. But once you learn how to cook on it properly, it's honestly amazing. The biggest tip is making sure that the pan is properly preheated and adding oil before adding any oil or food. I bought the Kirkland stainless steel cookware from Costco. So this is the frying pan, this is one of the pots, and then there's a few more pots and frying pans. And I've been really happy with it because it's durable, long-lasting, and doesn't have any of those coatings that will wear down over time. Plus, the price point you can't beat. And honestly, this is one of those swaps that just feels really worth it because we cook so often. The next area that I focused on was food storage. I started slowly replacing old plastic containers with glass containers or mason jars. This is stuff that I've pressure canned in here. And especially when reheating food, I personally feel a lot better about using glass instead of plastic. I also love mason jars because they're super inexpensive, versatile, and they last forever. And you can typically find them on Marketplace or Kijiji that people are trying to get rid of. And for freezer storage and snacks, I really like the Stasher silicone bags. These muffins I actually just pulled out of the freezer not too long ago and defrosted them. I make up a whole bunch of muffins, freeze them in here for my kids, and then can just pull them out when I need if I haven't had time to make muffins. These are also great storage bags to send to school, daycare. They won't get broken, and schools don't really like glass containers coming to school. They're reusable, easy to clean, and help cut down on disposable plastic bags too. Another swap that I made over time was upgrading some of my bakeware. I started using stainless steel baking trays for the oven and getting rid of all of my old scratched up non-stick baking sheets. Since bakeware gets heated to really high temperatures, this was another swap that I personally felt important to me. Another thing that I'm actually in the midst of converting right now is getting the caraway muffin trays. I've currently been using silicone muffin trays. I make mini muffins mostly. And these are just a basic non-stick, and I put parchment paper liners. So I'm waiting for my caraway muffin tray to come in the mail. I'm very excited to use it. Then there are smaller swaps that aren't necessarily urgent, but they really add up over time. I prefer using wooden cutting boards over plastic whenever possible because plastic boards can get really scratched up over time and that plastic is going into your food when you're cutting. I also switched to a glass kettle. This was from Costco. Pretty cheap investment. because kettles heat water up to really high temperatures, so you'd rather have it in glass or stainless than in plastic. And then over time, I've switched up more of my baking tools, like my measuring spoons, mixing bowls to stainless, garlic mincer, and measuring cups to glass. And then I also have some Le Creuset silicone mixing spatulas. At the end of the day, non-toxic living is really about reducing overall exposure in realistic ways that work for your family. You don't need perfection, you don't need to replace your entire kitchen tomorrow, because nobody does that. Even a few intentional swaps can really make a meaningful difference over time. I'd love to know in the comments what's one non-toxic swap you've already made or one that you're going to try next.